produce nuclear weapons with the same power yield as those of the great powers, as those of the United States. And it's been able to develop its nuclear weapons program, in particular thanks to the U.S.-Indian Treaty, which exempts India from the provisions of U.S. law and the Non-Proliferation Treaty that had, up till signing this treaty, barred states developing nuclear weapons outside the NPT, barred them from gaining aid in their nuclear weapons programs. Now, the U.S., of course, says that its nuclear aid to India is for civilian programs, but of course it can be transferred immediately to nuclear weapons programs, and doubtless that's being done. The treaty was signed pretty openly. There was no secrecy about this in order to improve the opportunities for U.S. corporations to sell nuclear equipment to India, jet planes, other military weapons, which would have been barred under the provisions of preceding U.S. law. So that's India. What about, of course, as India expands its nuclear weapons programs, its offensive programs, Pakistan does as well. Can't keep up, but it devotes resources to expanding its own offensive nuclear weapons capacity. That was developed primarily during the 1980s. It's one of Ronald Reagan's many gifts to the world. Reagan, the most vicious of Pakistan's many military dictators, Zia-ul-Haq, was the president in the 1980s after a military coup, and he was a real Reagan favorite. The U.S. was giving extensive aid to Pakistan. The pretext was the war in Afghanistan, the Russian invasion of Afghanistan. However, the CIA station chief in Islamabad made it very clear that the purpose of the aid is not to liberate Afghanistan. The U.S. didn't care about that. It was to kill Russians, as he put it. So in order to achieve that objective, meanwhile tearing Afghanistan to shreds and leaving it in the hands of radical Islamist fanatics who Reagan had organized and who proceeded to tear the place to shreds with such violence that the population welcomed the Taliban. In order to maintain this, Reagan and his administration pretended that they didn't know that Pakistan was developing nuclear weapons, although it was completely obvious, and they certainly knew, but they had to pretend that they didn't know, because otherwise there would have been a barrier to providing aid as Zia-ul-Haq carried out his programs, which included, among other things, the radical Islamization of Pakistan. With Saudi money and U.S. support, they developed a network of madrasas, radical schools, which laid the basis for what we're now seeing, in fact, radicalization and Islamic radicalization of substantial parts of Pakistan. So that's Pakistan. India, I've mentioned. What about Israel? Well, Israel, of course, developed its nuclear weapons with the support and of the United States. That's not controversial. But right at the time of the passage of Resolution 1887 and the furor about whether Iran is concealing something from the International Atomic Energy Agency, as they doubtless are, right in the middle of that furor, on the front pages every day, it still is, the international agency considered a resolution calling on Israel to join the Non-Proliferation Treaty and to open up its nuclear facilities, including weapons facilities, to international inspection. Well, the United States and Europe tried to block the resolution. When they failed, it was voted anyway, and it was passed. But then Obama immediately informed Israel that they were immune to it. He also informed India that they were immune from Resolution 1887. So the resolution wasn't literally barred. It was just barred from the sight of the American population, thanks to the cooperation of the media, which doesn't report things of this kind. You can read it if you read the Mexican press or read AP reports or something like that, but it didn't appear, none of this appears here. How did the United States respond to Resolution 1887? Well, right at the time that Obama received the Nobel Peace Prize for his inspiring contributions to peace, which maybe somebody can find if they have an electron microscope in their pocket. But right at that time, the Pentagon announced that it is rapidly accelerating the production of the most lethal weapons in the U.S. arsenal, short of nuclear weapons, 13-ton bombs to be delivered by B-52 stealth bombers, which are what are called massive penetration ordnance. They're designed to penetrate deep into the ground through, huge amounts of reinforced concrete and destroy whatever's down there. Now, these are huge bombs, way beyond anything else. Everybody knows exactly what they're for. They're one of the many threats against Iran. The programs had actually been initiated under George Bush, but kind of languished. However, as soon as Obama came into office, he called for sharp acceleration of the programs, and they are now, according to the Pentagon, accelerated by 3 years and should be deployed within a few months. That's a part of Washington's radical violation of the UN Charter and, of course, the Security Council resolution, which bans any threat of force. These are parts of the overt threat of force, in Israel's case as well. The U.S. and Israel were supposed to carry out air operations, clearly planning for, posed as a threat to Iran. That was kind of undermined when Turkey pulled out of it, refusing to join in these violations of international law. One of the reasons why Turkey is being slapped on the wrist for its disobedience these days. But those were the reactions of the 3 countries against whom Resolution 1887 was directed. Iran has a rotten government, nobody doubts that, and certainly nobody wants Iran to develop nuclear weapons, or anyone else for that matter. But it's easy to see why the world outside the West just doesn't take seriously Washington's professions of concern about these matters. And the same is true of Washington's profession, the West's professions of concern about human rights in Iran. A terrible repression, undoubtedly, but by the standards of U.S. allies in the region, not very bad. So it's not as bad as, say, Saudi Arabia or Egypt. Egypt has a brutal dictator, President Mubarak, and Obama made clear his attitude towards human rights when he visited Egypt for his famous Cairo speech, for which he was magnificently praised. He was asked what he had to say about President Mubarak, and his answer was, I don't like to use labels for folks. When a politician uses the word folks, you kind of get ready to shudder. Something awful's happening. And he continued, I don't like to use labels for folks, so I wouldn't call him authoritarian. In fact, he's a force for stability and good in the region. Can you wonder why the world collapses in ridicule outside the West when they hear the United States talking about concern for human rights in Iran? And in fact, it is most of the world outside the West. We don't hear about it because we're carefully protected from the events of the world by an information system designed for that purpose, media commentary and so on. So very few people know that when you read that Iran is defying the international community by enriching uranium. Very few people know that the term